If you're a reporter, a White House reporter in D.C., and you are going to be really adversarial and tough, but fair, on Trump, you get like snaps all across town. You get invited to like every single garden party and book party imaginable. But if you do it, with Biden or even with Obama, like there is like a different social like cost, and I do think it affects the reporting.
It is the Martha Zoller Show. That's Alex Thompson, who is one of the authors of Original Sin, along with Jake Tapper. And I think, quite frankly, he's been treated a little bit like he's been the also-ran guy, because he's the one that did the original research and had the book originally. And then Jake changed the idea a little bit. Alex's book was more about the Biden family. Jake said, hey, why don't we look at this demise of Joe Biden and his cognitive ability? And so they worked on the book together. But, of course, Jake Tapper is a little better known than Alex Thompson outside of journalist world. So in all the interviews, people have been attacking Jake Tapper because he was the one that up until the very end of 2024 was defending Joe Biden and not really being a very good journalist and pushing back. So he's gotten most of the attention. This was an interview that Alex Thompson did on his own, and he's right. And in my book, Indivisible, Uniting Values for a Divided America, that I think I'm going to do an update on. It was put out in 2006, 5 and 6. I think I'm going to update it for next year. So that's something I'm working on doing right now. And it was in the old days when I wrote that book. What I did was took a year full of cassette tapes, Logan. We recorded the show every day for like 6 months on cassette tapes. And then I bring them home and I transcribe them, and I sorted them into titles. I sorted them into topics. And then I put the book together from that, and then I added to it. But I figured I'm talking about these issues every day. The best way is just record a bunch of shows, transcribe them, and then make a book out of it.
And I'll tell you this much. It's going to be a whole lot easier for you to update it this time than it was back when you originally wrote it.
Yeah, because I can get AI transcription now.
Yeah, you
I don't
can.
have to. I was listening and typing while I was listening, because everybody thinks we got like 20 people working here. It's me and Logan does the Martha Zoller Show. Okay, people say, who is your person I need to contact? Me or Logan? That's who you have to contact.
Those are the options you got here.
It's very easy. But anyway, I digress. But I'm thinking about updating it. Several people have asked me to do it. Sadly, a lot of the issues I talk about haven't been updated very much. So I'm going to work on that. So we'll see how that goes. I've got to find a publisher, and they are actually a bunch of cheats. I hate to tell you that, but and I probably wouldn't get a big advance, and we'll just see how it all works out. But anyway, Alex, I'm glad he's getting anything out. And in a chapter in my book, I talked about this. Used to be journalists were kind of working class people that got into the business because they liked covering news. They were hard news guys, kind of like, hard detectives, that kind of thing. Then the advent of television, they started making real money. Okay, and when they started making real money, their wives and husbands started hanging out with the wives and husbands of important people. And their children started going to the same public schools and private schools that fancy people's children went to. They started getting invited to parties, and they didn't want to not get invited to parties. So it skewed the way they covered the news, especially the higher up you got in the ladder. The guys like Peter Jennings, who were going to be hard on everybody, Walter Cronkite, who was hard on everybody. I mean, Walter Cronkite was a big lib, but he was hard on everybody. He was an old school journalist. So journalism has changed, but I think there's a lot of hope. There's people like Megyn Kelly. There's people like the Ruthless Podcast. There are people actually like this pollster on CNN that actually tells the truth. So it's having a resurgence, and I feel good about that. Also have some good news and some sad news that's also good. One, we had a send-off for Anat Sultan-Dadon. She's going to be leaving, going back to Israel the end of the month, and we went to the temple last night and had a beautiful service, I guess you could call it, for her. Wonderful rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. The temple singers did a song called For Good, which is from Wicked, but it's kind of about how people have impacts on each other throughout their lives. There was the Israeli national anthem was sung, as well as several speeches and pictures and videos and things things like that. And then there was a reception before and after. And, Anat, you could see as prime minister one day. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, she could be the prime minister of Israel. And we've had the opportunity to talk to her here. Her two oldest daughters are going into the IDF. So everybody in Israel's got skin in the game. And I've talked about this before, that I think we ought to go back to where we require 2 years of military service from men. In Israel, it's men and women. But I think that, in the old days of state universities, you had to be in ROTC for 2 years. And then you did not have to go ahead and get commissioned. You could, after 2 years, say, no, I don't want to go into the military. And then, you're fine. But for the first 2 years, you had to get up for drill. You had to, learn about military history. You had to learn about patriotism, all that kind of stuff. And I think we ought to go back to that. I'll be honest with you. I think it was a unifying thing. And I think it's better when you give the option of you can join or not join. It's the same thing with the military academies. At the end of 2 years, you have to say if you're going to accept your commission or not. Now, obviously, you can't stay at West Point if you don't decide to get commissioned, but you can get a great education for a couple of years. So there's that option. They don't want people in the military that don't want to be in the military. But I think with the problems that we have with a lot of young men, that kind of discipline, and we can talk about women being involved in it too. Women are in ROTC now. I still am conflicted about women in combat, but as we have learned from the asymmetrical wars we've been fighting, that women are in combat. Whether we say they're in combat or not, they are. So they ought to be trained at the same level that the men are, which they are, and they ought to be prepared for anything that happens, which they are. So two of her daughters are going into the IDF, and her other daughter has a very severe illness, lifelong illness, a congenital illness that she will never, she'll never have a normal life. But they've done an amazing job as a family in allowing this child to have as good a life as she can have given the limitations that she has. She's happy and healthy. She's outlived the projections for her. She's 14 years old, and who knows what it will bring to them. But like a lot of people with special needs kids, what she shared last night, which I didn't know this about her, what she shared last night was that her daughter has taught her so much about what's important in life, and that maybe that was her purpose in life. I hear that from a lot of folks, and it really humbles me. I have a grandson that's got ITP, which is a blood disease, and so he has to be careful about contact sports and things like that because he bruises very easily. But, basically we have a very healthy family. And, when you hear stories of people that are dealing with these kinds of challenges every day, it makes you humble and appreciative for your blessings. And it's the reason why my husband and I, every morning and every night, whether we add a long prayer to it or not, every morning and every night, we thank the Lord for another day. And we thank the Lord for all the blessings that we have. And I consider even the challenges that I have in my life as a blessing, okay? Because if you do not, God puts those challenges in your path for a reason, okay? And He wants you to learn from them. And I try to be an optimistic person where even when I have to say, get thee behind me, Satan, because I'm thinking bad things, that God has put that challenge in my life for a reason. There was some breaking news overnight that kind of juxtaposed to this very happy event at the temple, where there was a somber moment, too, where we talked about the anti-Semitism, and the rabbi listed off all of the violent events that have happened in just the last 3 weeks around the country that are anti-Semitic in nature. And it was humbling to hear that. And we have to remember that we will not stand for any kind of hate crimes, but especially anti-Semitism, because you look at history and look at what anti-Semitism leads to, and it's not pretty. So that happened yesterday, which was very good. And then this kind of mixed feelings I have about this announcement I'm going to make right now is that the IDF and Shin Bet have recovered the bodies of 2 American-Israeli hostages, Judith Haggai and Gadi Haggai. And if I mispronounce that, I'm sorry. These 2 people were killed on October 7th, and their bodies were taken into Gaza as hostages. Dead people taken into Gaza as hostages. They have been held as bodies, as hostages, since October 7th. That is barbaric in nature, okay? That happened on October 7th. They were killed, and then they were taken taken into Gaza. What do you say when you take 2 dead bodies and you keep them for a year and a half? What do you say about that? I don't know. But it's horrific to me. Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, said, together with all the people of Israel, my wife and I send our heartfelt condolences to the beloved families. Our hearts ache over the unbearable loss. May their memory be a blessing. We will not rest until all of our hostages, both the living and the fallen, are brought home. And this is what is driving Israel, folks. And I know there are some of you out there that keep wanting to push back on Israel. But I don't hear you pushing back on Hamas. I hear you just dismissing Hamas as if, oh, well, yeah, they're a terrorist group. We've known that a long time. But the people of Gaza should be uniting with Israel to push Hamas out. Okay, Hamas has never done a good thing for the people of Gaza in their entire tenure. All they have done is incited fear and hate and loathing. And I was in this place yesterday where the people were positive and helping each other and looking out for each other. And they don't do that. Hamas does not do that. Hamas is on fear. And let's just fast forward to November of 2023, where they had the opportunity to release 40 hostages. I think they released half of them. And then they reneged on the rest of the deal. At that point, a month into this, really, there hadn't been very much damage done at all. And if they had given all the hostages back then the world would have made them negotiate for some kind of peace deal that would be good for the people, okay? There's been about 17 other opportunities for them to come to the table, and in every single opportunity, if they released some of the hostages, they did not release the total number that they agreed to. And, you know, how can you deal with somebody like that? So what we have to understand is there is a clear right and wrong in this situation. And it is Hamas that has caused all the pain and heartache and are the people that could stop it. Because as Golda Meir said, if the terrorists put down their guns, war will stop. If we put down our guns, we'll be killed.